Are you going to use this for the intros? Who are the people that bought Naomi's dinner at the, are they here yet? She told us all about it.
Not like, but I'm sitting in front.
Sorry.
Did they bring something for everyone?
I don't know if they brought carry out.
It's really good. Korean restaurant. It's delicious.
Wow. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. My name is Marianne, and I'm the store manager here at City Bookshop, an independent, community-minded, and woman-owned bookstore. And is this anybody's first time here? Several people. Wow, welcome. Thank you so much. And welcome back to everyone who has been here before. We are so thrilled to be here tonight with Naomi Hirahara and Cheryl A for a discussion of Evergreen, a Japantown mystery in which a Japanese American nurse's aide navigates the dangers of a post-World War II and post-Manzanar life as she attempts to find justice for a broken family. If you enjoy tonight's event, check out our other upcoming events and book clubs, which you can find on our website. You may be particularly interested in our August 17th event with Diana Rayburn, discussing her mystery killers of a certain age.
That's a good book.
Thank you. You can trust her recommendation. Before we get started and I introduce our authors, some very quick housekeeping notes. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to silence any devices you have, we'd appreciate it. If you need a restroom tonight, they are located upstairs past the cash register. More importantly, if you need to purchase any books by our authors, they are upstairs at the cash register as well. You can also order them online and we ship anywhere. And we'll have a Q&A and signing following the discussion tonight. Now, I would like to introduce tonight's conversation partner, Cheryl A. Cheryl writes the award-winning Charlie Mack Motown Mysteries, and most recently, the indie next pick, Time's Undoing, a crime novel based on her family's personal tragedy. Formerly of Detroit, Head's books are included in the special collections of the Library of Michigan and the Detroit Public Library's African American Books List. She is vice chair of the BatcherCon Board of Directors and lives in Washington, D.C. with her partner and canine supervisors, Abby and Frisbee. And we are so thrilled to welcome tonight Naomi Hirahara. Naomi is the Mary Higgins Clark Award-winning author of Clark and Division, the Edgar Award-winning author of the Masarai Mystery Series, and the author of the LA-based LA Rush Mysteries. A former editor of the Rafu Shimpo newspaper, she has co-written nonfiction books like Life After Manzanar and the award-winning Terminal Island Lost Communities of Los Angeles Harbor. The Stanford University alumna was born and raised in Altadena, California. She now resides in the adjacent town of Pasadena, California. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will hand it over to our authors.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to be talking to Naomi. She knows that I admire her work, and we had
It's mutual.
thank you. We had breakfast at BoucherCon last year in Minneapolis, and I just was fawning all over her. So when she asked if I would ask her questions, I said, "Oh, you betcha!" So happy to be here. So Naomi, as you have heard, is an Edgar Award-winning author. She is the author of numerous books, both nonfiction and fiction. She is a former journalist. I think of her as a public intellectual. I really do. She has a wealth of information about lots of different subjects, but I think she has a real expertise in the experience of Japanese Americans before, during, and after World War II. You've written a nonfiction book about life in Manzanar, and your books easily, I think, meld the history that you know into the fiction and novel format so easily. In 2021, Naomi released the very successful Clark and Division book, which is the book one in the Japantown mystery series. I'm going to read you some of the accolades for that book. Marianne did a few. The Mary Higgins Clark Award, the Lefty Award for Best Historical Novel, nominee for the Agatha Award and the Anthony Award. Parade magazine called it one of the 101 best mystery books of all time. The New York Times gave it a book review editor's choice. The Washington Post called it best mystery and thriller of the year. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the best book of the year. Barnes and Noble, best books of the year. And Amazon, best mysteries and thrillers of the year. That's not too shabby.
It's surreal because it all happened during the pandemic.
Right.
So did
Well,
that
and
really happen?
people had time to read and
True,
enjoy. Yeah.
true.
So now Naomi has written, so Clark and Division really is the story of a family, a Japanese American family, the Ito family, who are whisked away and detained in Manzanar, one of the 10 concentration camps that Japanese Americans were forced to settle in during World War II. It also looks at the time when they relocate to Chicago, which is a very interesting piece of the story. And as the family is trying to really adjust to their freedom, they have a tragedy in the family. Their oldest daughter is killed. The youngest daughter, Aki Ito, takes it upon herself to investigate her sister's mysterious death because they think it's a suicide and she's convinced it is not. In this new book, Evergreen, it looks at the family after they have left Chicago and moved back to Los Angeles, where they don't find their home. It's gone. Where the father does not find his place of business. It's gone. Where the life of Japanese Americans have been turned upside down. Aki is now married. She's a nurse's aide and finds herself stumbling over yet another mystery that she has to solve that she thinks will negatively impact her family. It's a great book. I really love it. You know, I loved your Mas Arai mystery series, and that's how I came to know your work. But I really like Aki too. Tell us about her.
You know, it's weird because this Masarai series, it's about an old gardener in Hiroshima. Actually, this is the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, Hiroshima survivor who solves crimes. And so I was in an old man's head for 7 books. And I kind of at the time liked it because I was very close to, I was telling you, my father, and it's that character is an homage to him. And you know what's weird, Cheryl? I had to grow into writing from a woman's point of view. And I think perhaps some of it was, you know, because I felt more freedom, like representing my father's story because he was so supportive and open. And maybe, you know, the woman's voice was a little bit too close to home in a way. I've actually written a middle grade book. So I had to kind of go into it from a 12-year-old's point of view. So that's kind of how I started to find my female voice. I did a lot of short stories too, which was very helpful. With Aki, I know some of you know Nisei. Some of you might be related to them in the crowd, but Nisei refers to second generation Japanese American, so American born. And this group of, especially the women, because I wrote at a newspaper for this audience or wrote about them and for them, many of them were not that transparent, you know, so I couldn't really figure out what is really going on, you know. And I know one time I said, okay, let's do this Valentine's Day special and let's interview people about romance in camp, you know. And so that, you know, they gave their stories to the reporter. And then I started getting these calls. Wait a minute, you know, this is before the article was published. Take that part out. Take that part out. You know, it's all this self-censorship. And then it occurred to me, this is a group of people where their friend group or maybe their larger family group is very important to them. They're worried about how they're perceived. So that's why they're very careful. And whereas some of the men, it's like, yeah, put me in the paper, you know, it's that machismo, you know, they didn't care, you know, what people thought of them. And it's just a group of women that I know they had done so much for their family. I know that they suffered, you know, but they weren't going to, at least the ones that I ran into, that wasn't the first thing they were going to put out there. But yeah, so I really, and Aki turns out, at least for me, like the best vessel to tell the Nisei story. And also she's a younger sister. And I don't have any sisters, which is kind of weird. You know, I have a younger brother who adores me. So we have a really great relationship. But then I have a lot of friends, I guess, because I'm an older sister, a lot of my friends are like younger sisters, and they would kind of tell me, yeah, their older sister, the shining star, blah, 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 blah. And I go, this is so interesting. And I was thinking, well, what if I create this scenario because it's history, but we have to write a story about people.
Correct.
What if this younger sister who adores her older sister,
Rose.
yeah,
Mhm.
and what if something happens? Can Aki step in
Mhm.
to those shoes
Mhm.
and carry her parents
Mhm.
through this very tumultuous
Mhm.
period? And that issue of birth order and position in the
Yeah.
family, that was really interesting to me.
Yes.
And how she kind of learns about Rose, you know, because she was separated from her when Rose was in went to Chicago first, and tries to pull it together.
Mhm.
So now, you know, with the second book, and this is like the bookend to Clark and Division, we're dealing, she's a newlywed.
Yes.
She's in her early 20s and gotten married to a man she doesn't know that well.
Right.
You know, which many
And
women
who's
of
in the service
yes,
away from home.
yes.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this is her next challenge.
Mhm.
Can she keep her marriage intact? And he is with the 100th 442 Regimental Combat Unit. I don't know if you all are familiar with them. They were all, except for the officers, they were all Japanese American infantrymen, and they fought in Europe.
Decorated unit.
They were the most decorated for a unit of their size. And my father-in-law was a member of that unit, and he was actually injured and wore a brace his whole life. But they referred to them as go for broke because they kind of went for it. They fought with ferocity and sacrificed a lot. So I would buy him like these go for broke history books. And finally one time he said, Naomi, stop giving me these things. It's not nice. And then it was like, whoa. And then it occurred to me that while we want to honor these folks, that maybe some people who were on the front lines and really saw things, they don't want to be reminded.
A lot of them do not. Yeah.
And that's something about these Nisei soldiers that I felt is not really depicted. It's more like, you know, they're heroes,
Yes,
and they should be
right.
lauded, but in terms of the emotional things they had gone through.
Yeah.
And then I talked to a woman who worked with these older veterans, and she revealed to me a lot of them had later in life were seeking psychological help, or their wives were saying, yeah, you know, weird sleep patterns and nightmares and things. So I go, oh, this is something I want to explore. And then I have a friend who works for Densho, Brian Nia. He's like into encyclopedic information. And he goes, Naomi, I have a list of all these crimes that Nisei veterans committed because of the PTSD, you know, and they call it shell shock, you know, and that's kind of shocking. But then this is what I'm attempting to do with my mysteries, like to show these group of people, they're human, you know.
Yeah, well, you do such a great job of incorporating the history, but within the context of relationships and environment. I mean, the atmospherics of this book are wonderful. The food, the flora and fauna. You are an acute observer because you describe some of your characters, even the secondary characters, in such unique ways. I remember one description talks about a man whose eye flutters at a different rate than his left eye. And I thought, who does that? Who notices that kind of stuff? It's really wonderful.
Thank you.
Want you to read just a little bit from the epigraph. You feel up to doing that? And while you're getting your place there, you know, I want to say that Aki is kind of coming of age. She's a young woman, but she has a lot of tenacity. She a lot of curiosity about the world and the new environment she's in. She's brave also. She puts herself in some really interesting situations that suggest to me that she's a brave young woman.
I think she is. And although she doesn't at this point in her life doesn't have any children, biological children, she really cares about young people.
She cares about a lot of people. Very empathetic, and she's a nurse's aide, and she's constantly coming to people's aid.
So this is just a one-page kind of epigraph, and it kind of sets everything up. And if you don't know much about Japanese American history and the resettlement period, this will give you a taste. This is kind of like an outline. While we were gone, the military dismantled our fishing village in Terminal Island. While we were gone, schools and cities buried our Japanese community gardens. While we were gone, Dutch immigrants looked after our flower market in downtown Los Angeles. While we were gone, Black defense workers from the Deep South, having no other place to live, moved into empty buildings of Little Tokyo. While we were gone, beloved classmates mourned our absence. While we were gone, thieves plundered our storage units. While we were gone, Baptist churches rented our temple buildings. While we were gone, our competitors took over our farming operations and produce markets. While we were gone, friends wrote letters asking the government to release our Issei fathers from alien detention centers. While we were gone, White Memorial Hospital birthed babies in our hospital in Boyle Heights. And then, after 4 years, we returned. So that gives you a sense.
And you really take every one of those statements and their place somewhere in this story. I was really impressed with the way you depict community and the support of community, not just in the Japanese American community, but across the ethnic communities of East LA, and how some folks took so when Japanese Americans were taken forcefully from their homes, often with just a suitcase, they had all these belongings that sometimes other people in the community took care of them for them. So the Itos come back and they get their car back from a Mexican American man, and they get their china from another neighbor. I really enjoyed that. I love that aspect.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe one thing that's kind of different about my books. I'm trying to look at, some books just look at one ethnicity, but I want to show like this Los Angeles is different kinds of people.
Melting pot.
Yeah, we're working together. And I think some of it is aspirational. I think if some people are in trouble, and need help, how am I going to react? Am I going to just say, you can't help everyone, but sometimes there's a situation that someone comes into your life and you're kind of weighing, what should I do? So the fact that certain people help the ethos makes me think, I hope I could rise to the occasion when called. I don't know. It's a sacrifice for
Yes,
sure.
yes. Why do you put so much attention to your secondary characters? There's some of them are just wonderful and stay in my mind as much as the Ito family themselves, like the head nurse at the at the hospital. She
Yeah.
was a pistol.
Yeah, a lot of it actually Evergreen is very autobiographical. And sometimes I want to you have characters in your lives, these people that that just stay in your mind, and maybe they're not around. And that particular nurse was modeled after a secretary that I knew. She the nurse Homa doesn't wear a wig, but this woman, the secretary, always wore this wig, and she was very big, and she was actually a Nagasaki survivor. So that's what they have, and that connection to Nagasaki is similar. But so
Then you had the attorney who was helping her, and he's the one who spotted how smart she was. He said that to her a couple of times. Oh, you're very clever.
that particular, I actually put some real people in there, and that was modeled after a friend's father, who had Elmer Yamamoto. So I kind of seeded this book with real people. There's also at the newspaper group, they hang out at this chop suey place called Far East.
I did a lot of eating while I was reading your book, I
yeah,
must say.
and
She
which is-
describes food a lot.
And it still exists. They call it the Far Bar now, but there's also Far East Cafe. Yeah, so they hang out there, and one of them, because did you like Chester Himes? Are you a Chester Himes
Yes,
fan?
of course.
Which
Yippee hours.
African American,
Yes.
mystery writer who's inspired me a lot. And during World War II, this one writer, Japanese Nisei writer, they were taken away, and they rented the house to Chester Himes. And that was really true. And he wrote his one of his novels, When He Hollers, Let Him Go There.
That's probably why it comes across as so authentic. I
Yeah.
didn't know these were real people, but they're rich and they leap from
Yeah,
the page.
yeah,
They really
yeah.
do. You were both a reporter and an editor at Rafu Shimpo. Am I
Mhm,
saying it right?
mhm.
Yes. How does being a journalist, and how has that impacted your writing fiction and novels?
I think because I like to do research, definitely. And dialogue is kind of important to me. But I think also, especially from Aki's point of view, The prose is pretty straightforward. It's not super fancy, but I'm judiciously selecting, concrete details to kind of bring the place and time alive. So it's a different type of writing. It's not like, okay, I'm going to describe, this scene right here, the physicality. It's more the relationships of people and how succinctly can I kind of do that and paint it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Relationships with people. You have a couple of dogs in there that I were really cool.
Oh, I know the dogs and the dogs. That's like, we lost one of our dogs during the pandemic. And so I had that.
That's why that's included.
Yeah.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
And the thing that happens later, that kind of happened to us too. So
So you alluded that writing Ma Sarai and other male characters has really kind of been your forte. I think you write really strong male characters. I really like the Hammer. What's his last name?
Ishimine.
Yes, I really
Ishimine.
liked him in this book.
That was in Ahmad, there was a
He's flawed, but I really
yeah,
liked him.
that was a
Was he a real person too?
no, that wasn't a real person, but there was a woman, Joanne Ishimine, who was a broadcaster in Southern California. And I go, I'm gonna pick her name. Just a random name.
Yeah. I think that the men really kind of leap off the page as well. There is the husband, Art.
Uh-huh.
We don't get to know a lot about Art until the end, where he really shows who he is. His coworkers at the newspaper. I really enjoyed reading about Henry. Charles, the African American guy, who's, I mean, your characters are flawed, but they're very rich, and they all have some source of humanity that you pull out of them and show on the page. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do like writing men. I think men at a certain point of time in our history were able to do more outside, right? Women were more limited in terms of how the public allowed them. Like in college, I took one class called Women in Cities, and it just talked about, the limitations that a lot of women had in different countries and different time periods. So I think that's one reason with Ma Sarai, this guy, he was free to take his beat up old truck and drive around and solve all these crimes, where as a woman of his generation could not do as much, and that's another thing about writing historicals, because I don't write necessarily straight out kick-ass women, and a lot of our colleagues do, which is very cool,
which are very good,
and they could beat up anybody, but my motto, if I see something weird going on, I run. That's because I know I'm not going to be able to do much. So but so under the I think a woman, depending on other things besides maybe her martial arts power, is kind of interesting, how she uses what she has.
But you also don't use, which is kind of a trope in mystery and other books, you don't use sexuality. You use something else. You use what I think men see in Aki is kind of her forcefulness, her determination. When she grasps onto something, she doesn't let go. I like that.
Yeah. And I think here, because she is a nurse's aide, that is kind of a power that she has, some kind of access to medical help. And
that gives her some status.
Exactly. Yeah. And some level of expertise. And also that she's not going to just dissolve, when she sees blood or, those kind of situations. Right.
I love the way you use lots of Japanese in the book, sometimes explaining it right on the page, and other times leaving it up to the reader to go off and do their own homework, which I love. But I never felt I never got lost in it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, it was really, it was helpful to, to see the distinctions between the words. When you were describing food, you would then say what it was. I mean, I literally had to stop and order noodles one time because there was so much, and it wasn't that the food was front and center, but they were cooking their regular meals, and it was described so wonderfully. I'm going like, I gotta have noodles tonight. Who's your favorite character in the book?
I do like Hammer. And he's more of a troublemaker type, and he was an orphan. And my heart kind of go, and a character like Hammer adds a lot because things happen.
Right.
Things, he was a bigger presence in Clark and Division.
Right. I
But
remember
yeah,
him
but
there
even
as well.
even here, and yeah, all the characters. What I like to do is, when actually key in this book is the older man Haruki Watanabe, who
Yes.
comes to the hospital
Right.
and is injured,
That's right.
and Aki's trying to figure out, is he a
Is this-
victim of elder abuse or
Mhm.
what's going on?
Mhm.
And yeah, and so a person may just look at him, he's just a victim, and come to their own conclusions, but there's more to him, you know.
Right. Right.
So I kind of, I don't I think in a mystery, because everyone's a suspect,
Yes.
we can't
Yes.
just make them flat. And
That's right.
that's maybe why the secondary characters are important,
Right.
because they're all suspects.
Yes, they are. And I didn't think the person who did it had done it. So that you did a really good job of that. And I'm
That's good.
usually able to pick that out early on. So that's great. Tell me what's next in this Japantown series. You're working on a third, I understand.
Well, I'm going to continue with the series, but they're going to be linked stories. So in different time periods. So
Uh-huh.
this next one is called Crown City and is located in Pasadena, California, where I live. And it's 1903.
Wow.
So it's kind of looking at Japanese aesthetics in architecture and arts of that time, and the arts and crafts movement.
Wow.
Yeah. How
See,
it
this is why I
impacted-
call her a public intellectual. And you've written books about flowers.
Yes. Yeah, flower. And here, and I steal from myself because there's a flower market here. and yeah.
So you went to Stanford. What was your major?
International relations.
You spent some time in Africa.
Yeah. Ghana.
Yeah, in Ghana.
Have you been?
I've not been to Ghana. I've been
Okay.
only to South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. So what brings you, your curiosity about the world comes through in all your books. Is it
Mhm.
because of your educational background? Is it your family background? Your father was a survivor of Hiroshima, right?
Mhm, mhm. I don't know. Both my parents, my dad is gone, but my mom's, they're very curious. My mom's 87 and
Mhm.
she's taking Spanish.
Good for her.
Yeah. Because I think she read, learning another language keeps your brain, intact. So I think, I think I get that more from my mom, the curiosity, but both my parents have gone through a lot. They've lived in different countries.
Mhm.
So that's probably made its
Maybe
impact.
that's what it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Is it about time to do that? Anybody have questions for Naomi about this book or her writing or any of her previous books? Happy to answer them. Yes, yeah, it looks like you might have one. So asking about the availability of the first book, Clark and Division, available. Yes. Other questions?
And what I love about this publisher, Soho, is they do maps. So
Oh, that's right.
there's these really pretty maps in both of them. And that paperback Clark and Division, they have some information in the back to give it some historical context, as well as questions for book groups and things like that. And some recipes. Yeah.
Of course.
I think there's some recipes. Yeah.
And Clark and Division in Chicago is an actual intersection. You did go to Chicago to do research, right? Did you
Yes,
know
I did.
Chicago before you went
I
there?
did not know it well. I had only been there once.
Wow.
And before I decided there's something to this story.
Right.
So I then took 2 research trips.
Right.
And there were people, experts that I knew that took me on the walking
helped you.
tours. Yeah.
And Aki works at the Newberry Library, which is
Yeah.
a gorgeous library in
Yes,
Chicago.
yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was scary to write this book,
The
the
first
Clark and
one.
Division. Yeah.
Why?
Because I was new to, I knew Chicago was a place that if I got it wrong,
Oh, yes.
I would hear about it.
Only about the food, though. The food and the baseball team.
No, I know. I think the geography. I think
Okay.
people would be on my case. But the only thing I got was a time, actually a historical thing. And luckily it was just with advanced reading copy. And my fellow writer at Soho caught it because I had a beer can
Oh.
and my character, Roy, he opened it with a tab.
Oh, yeah.
And back then you use like a church.
That's the
key,
other thing, beer.
like-
I forgot about beer.
yeah. And he goes, oh, I know, I'm sure Naomi's corrected this, but just to let you know, he read the arc and I go, okay, I got to correct this.
That's
And
so interesting.
and then other people who had the advanced reading copy, they sent me emails, and the subject line was "big mistake." Like it was so horrible. I got this wrong. So that scared me. We cleaned that up. And then I was like, "What else am I going to hear?"
Yes,
But it's been quiet. I haven't heard any
it's still August.
complaint. No, this is from last
Oh,
from Clark and
Oh,
Division
okay.
in 2021.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. I'm sure I'm gonna hear some things. We'll see.
Yeah,
We hear stuff, right?
we do. Mystery readers are very particular. They spot things and they want to call it to your attention when they spot it.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
will call you out on things. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
really do have to do your homework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And in your work, when you do historicals, you're working with things like, a beer can. You're dealing with Japanese, like when you write a specific group of people. That relationship. You're writing about the place, the
Right.
city. So
Right.
you can get it wrong in
And you
so
know
many
what?
ways.
When you're writing about World War II,
Yeah,
there are people out there who will pounce on you if you get any of it wrong.
yeah.
I mean, I think most of the soldiers now are dying. They're in their late 90s now, but family members. I wrote a historical fiction about Negro soldiers in World War II, and I heard lots of comments about it didn't happen that way, and you have to remind people it's fiction, that kind of thing. But yeah, World War II people are just as bad as mystery readers about calling you out on things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it adds to our excitement, right?
I guess if you say so. Yeah. So you write 4 different series.
I've written for, some I've had to kind of let go.
Right.
We'll just see.
How are you able to manage that though? Shifting from character to character,
Oh.
time frame to time frame, plot lines. How do you do that?
I think that's a newspaper experience because, and I was the editor.
Yeah.
So I had to do special issues like holiday issue, graduation issue, wedding issue, whereas working every day, so I'm not linear.
Okay.
I can hold a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think being a child of an immigrant mother, I had to listen a lot. And my father was born here, but raised in Japan, and he didn't speak standard English, so like I had to interpret things, what they were saying, as well as what the world was saying.
Mhm.
So you just get used to, are you an immigrant?
Yeah. Immigrant daughters. I mean,
I'm a child of an immigrant.
right.
So you get it.
Dad. And yeah, you do have to do a lot of translating. My
Mhm.
husband's also an immigrant too. So
Mhm.
there is a lot of that translation. that
Right.
goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my husband is third generation, so he's more literal. Like if there's something comes up, he goes, I don't get it. I go, just look at the context, but he's more like, no, this is what, he's more black and white. So it's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is he your first reader, your husband?
No,
No. Does he like mysteries?
it's
Certainly
not his, he's a Cormac he's really into literary fiction.
Okay.
But
Oh,
he did one thing with Clark and Division when I gave him the arc.
Okay.
He read it all the way through. I go, oh, something's going on.
That's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have that kind of relationship where, some couples do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
their first reader, their editor. But I like kind of a separation,
Uh-huh.
and he loves me whether I write or not.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of nice that, this person's rooting for me as a person.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
not like you have to be success. And if because,
Yeah.
sometimes things don't go our way,
Yeah.
and so you want that person to be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you miss your reporting days, your journalism days?
Not in this context. It's a
Okay.
different world, right?
Right.
It's a different world
Yeah.
of reporting and how a lot of
It's
people,
much harder, and
they don't trust journalists anymore.
it's not as well respected as it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's not that many outlets, and
Right.
now Chat GPT, like
Yeah.
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate that. I was in Birmingham just day before yesterday. The National Association of Black Journalists were there, 4,000, and
Mm.
most of them young. And I was invigorated to
Oh,
see
that's
young
great.
people still wanting to report about the world. And
Well, it's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to your point, it's changed so much. Newspapers are gone. Shimpo's been around since
Yeah.
1903 or
Yeah,
something like that.
1903.
But so ethnic newspapers may be around, but the big newspapers
Yeah.
are dying. It's
But the ones,
demoralizing.
yeah, we'll just see what happens. But I know for a while it was like a lot of things you saw on social media were links to actual print. You know, they were getting their material
okay.
from, but I don't know. Everything's changing. Yeah,
Right,
everything's turned upside
right.
down. I respect journalists, you know,
do too.
good ones.
Yeah,
I
I do
respect
too.
them.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think it's just, well, it's just like everything else. It's hard to make a living no matter
yeah.
what you're doing,
I'm
right?
gonna check on time. Do I have
Yeah.
time for one more question? So how much do you think the average person knows about the plight of Japanese Americans in this country during World War II?
Good
I mean, I
question.
told you when we first met that when I was 12, for some reason, I read We of Nagasaki, which was a first person memoir of someone who had survived Nagasaki. We had strange books in our house and I just read everything that was there.
Mm.
But so I had an interest in it already, but I wonder how much interest there is in the general population about it. Oh, that might be right.
You know,
Yeah.
my dad was military, so we knew about it and we were always sent to the Pacific. So as a kid growing up, I knew about it.
Yeah.
But, and as a teacher, of the East Coast, I don't think this is something that.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
How about the pink ladies?
Oh, well, we're both from California.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we're from San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
So it was taught very little in
Mm.
our high school setting. And so your areas, Pasadena.
Mhm.
My grandparents were in San Francisco.
Okay.
San Diego.
Right.
Salinas.
Oh,
Salinas. Yeah,
Right,
that's one.
right.
My dad was from Watsonville.
Yes.
Yes.
In
So
Watsonville.
they taught very little of it, but they did speak out on the camps and school, but.
And growing up in the 80s and 90s, traveling the Western seaboard, visiting family, the communities that we traveled in, it was amazing to go into different communities
Mhm.
where we actually had to experience different cultures and how we weren't sheltered.
Okay, yeah.
So we were able to appreciate and learn and see firsthand how, making the food and buying the groceries and talking to their kids and what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable. Our next door neighbors, even in San Diego, we grew up having families where the kids, our friends that we went to school with, were interpreters for their parents, and for us and for their friends. And so we grew up getting to observe that and to see how that affected them. And we got to be their friend and see them, they kind of got to relax when they didn't have to be the interpreter, didn't have to, be on, have all aspects of their brain on. They got to shut down and kind of just relax a little bit. And it was,
I loved going to Little Chinatown when I was little.
yeah.
And then San Francisco, there's a little Italian area, but Chinatown, I had so much fun there. I came home with so
Yeah.
many of those, the cats.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The cats.
Yeah, the cat, the maneki, the welcome cat. Yeah, this one, I'll just end it, while we were gone, beloved classmates mourned our absence. That was
Mhm.
when I did programming in Southern California and was with senior women who were like children during World War II.
Mm.
Sometimes they had tears in their eyes because they said they were white and that their Japanese American friends were just taken and no one explained anything to them.
No,
So it traumatized them,
right.
and it
Yeah.
kind of reminded me of like an alien story, like,
Just come and
yeah. And then that's when I said, this is not Japanese American. This is an American
This is
story
American
because
story.
even people who weren't locked up, they saw the absence,
Right.
that and had questions.
Yeah, it
right.
is a little known part of, I think, American history and little taught part of American history, because I thought I knew a lot. But when I was reading your book, I realized some of the specific facts around it. Like I didn't know a lot about at 9066,
Mhm.
order 9066.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the difference between Japanese Americans who lived on the West Coast and East Coast, and how the East Coast Japanese Americans weren't necessarily affected. There's a lot still to be taught. And that's why it's so important that all our stories get out there, that we can't afford to ban books about things that might make us uncomfortable. We have to, every story
Yeah.
has really an importance in our democracy.
And I think I try to write emotionally.
Yes,
I mean,
you
which
do.
is different than the journal. I mean, we journalism, you are speaking to emotion to some, but I think when as fiction writers,
Mhm,
we
Mm.
have to write emotion. That's
Mhm.
how we really get to people,
mhm.
so they can see themselves
Mhm.
as our characters.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you do a marvelous job of doing that. It's a very atmospheric book. You learn a lot, but you're also drawn into the individual stories and relationships in the book. It's well crafted and with lots of depth of character and nuance and recipes and food. Thank you, Naomi. Unless there's other questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
And they were asking if Naomi could talk a bit about the transformation of Little Tokyo to Bronzeville back to Little Tokyo.
Yeah, so I gave Cheryl a little yeah, it's over there. That's at Bronzeville, Little Tokyo. So in that little epigraph, it talked about how Black defense workers, and Chester Himes has written about this, in Walter Mosley too, had come into Southern California to work in the defense industry, the factories. But the thing is, there were racial covenants, and it was like, come and work, but you have no place to live. And then some authorities were going, wait a minute, we have this place right next to City Hall that's empty. It's a ghost town, as where Japanese Americans had lived. Why don't you live there? So it's very kind of overcrowded, and not the most sanitary, but it was a place for, these defense workers and their families to live. And what was kind of fun is there was a lot of music. There's jazz clubs, which is integrated in Evergreen, and they would have breakfast clubs, because sometimes you had the night shift, and you come home, you eat your pancakes while listening to jazz. So it's very lively culturally. The African American newspaper, the California Eagle, was supportive of Japanese Americans returning. I mean, it was very sensitive, right? Because you have folks who have found Little Tokyo for their home for like 3-4 years,
Yeah.
and suddenly people are coming back and want to move back. And there was still tension, but it could have been much more
So
adversarial, I think.
it occurs to me to ask you about, were there Japanese American newspapers still working at this time, telling the story of Japanese American
In
displacement?
Utah, yeah, and
Mhm.
there was places where people could actually run into.
Mhm.
All the camps had newspapers.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, which
Oh,
is
that's
very
really
interesting.
Yeah.
But it was very select. They couldn't write totally freely.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
yeah,
mhm. Because in my books, the Black newspapers were really the heart and soul
Yeah.
of the information Black communities could get
Mhm.
about the real plight of Negro soldiers in World War II. So I
Yeah.
wondered if your own newspapers really did a good job of that.
it reopened in LA in January 1st, 1946.
Mhm.
So, and now Los Angeles Public Library and some other libraries, they have it all digitized.
Oh, that's excellent.
So that's what I refer to.
Yeah, that's
to,
excellent.
To
Yeah.
kind of paint the picture, which
Yeah.
is really helpful.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we close it out? No?
Oh, I have one.
She's
I have a
one more thing.
giveaway. Who in the audience can either do origami or fold a crane, or know of someone who
I
can
looked at you
fold a
'cause you're
crane?
teacher.
Okay. Like, raise your hand,
Origami.
or want to learn how to do it. Okay, so
People who have grandchildren need to learn this.
okay, so what I'm going to give you, I wanted to honor, because it is
So
August
this is the
6th.
actual anniversary
Yeah,
today.
yeah,
Oh,
okay.
I didn't realize.
And now with Oppenheimer, it's kind of in the news, but I had purchased this little origami paper set from Hiroshima when I was there in like 2016. I had it. So these are little special papers. So you could take that, put in your suitcase, and give it to a friend. Yeah. So that's my little giveaway.
Will you join me in thanking Naomi Hirahara for being here? That's right. And then be able to.
Yes. So yes, just as Cheryl was saying, we'll reset the space and set up a signing table here. You can help us out by folding your chairs and just setting them to the side of the room. We'll be ready to come back and sign books in a couple minutes. If you need to buy your copies still, you can get them upstairs at the cash register or on our website. And I want to just once again thank Cheryl, thank Naomi for being here. We are so thrilled to have you and grateful for all of you for joining us as well.
Everyone